All right, let's get this party started. In this demonstration, I'm going to teach you how to enable diagnostics for your common Azure infrastructure and platform as a service resources. Let's begin with virtual machines. We'll head on over to the virtual machines blade. And of my list of machines, I happen to know that this WinDemo2 box does not yet have diagnostics enabled. So we'll pop on over to its settings, and I'll scroll down to the monitoring settings section. Here, let's go to diagnostic settings. We see effectively an advertisement for guest diagnostics. It tells us here, to get started, we enable guest level monitoring, and then as you see across the top, we have this banner. Now, these specific items are going to differ a little bit depending upon whether it's a Windows Server or a Linux virtual machine, obviously. This is a Windows Server 2016 VM, so we're going to be able to tap into the performance counters, the event logs, memory crash dumps, etc. So let's do this. Let's enable guest level monitoring. Now, you know that when you deploy VMs from the Azure Marketplace, you have the option to enable diagnostics there as well, that's for sure. But we're doing it here post-deployment. It takes a couple minutes for Azure to deploy the diagnostics extension to the virtual machine, but after it does, we now have access to each of these pages here. The overview page just is giving us a little verbosity in terms of describing what each of the pages are, as you see. We can then browse to each page specifically to determine the granularity that we want to pull things like performance counters, as you see here. And we've got our event logs. You can scope at what level you want to collect, our crash dumps, whether or not we want to enable memory dumps or not. Syncs allows you to send your data out to other destinations. In particular, it's really cool that Microsoft now allows us to send VM data into an application insights instance. Why is this useful? Because I have plenty of businesses in my consulting practice who run their line of business applications not in app services, regardless of how much I've tried to convince them, but instead they run them in VMs. And they want to take advantage of the instrumentation that Application Insights offers. And then Agent is where you can verify the meta of your Azure Diagnostics agent. You can see down at the bottom, you can manually remove it. You can specify the storage account. I'm actually going to change the storage account destination that's being used by the VM to a central one that I'm sharing, TW Cloud Shell. You'll see in the next demo where you can go into the storage account to retrieve that data. I better make sure to save my changes. That's the long and the short of the virtual machine interface for enabling diagnostics logs. Why don't we check out app services next? Let's browse out to our app services blade. And I'm going to pick on my PS Demo App 001, which is an ASP.NET web application that's backed by an Azure SQL database. And once again, we'll come down under monitoring, and we have diagnostic logs. And here's where we can turn on or off those various levels of logging. Much of this is going to be dependent upon your developers putting tracing in your source code. You can get to those files which are stored in the underlying virtual machines file system by accessing these FTP or FTPS links. You also can use what's called the Custo interface. Hang on for a second, I'll explain that in a moment. But in the meantime, let me filter the settings list here for this web app and go to Application Insights. I want to make sure you understand how to do this. We have to turn on the site extension, which is basically a virtual machine extension under the hood. It's just all hosted for us. Collect application monitoring, yes. And then we have to specify our resource. Now you either create a new one or select an existing one. This is an Application Insights resource, which in turn is tied in with Azure Log Analytics. I already created an instance, so I'm going to select it right here, this App Insights Web in the South Central US. And then below that, you choose what your development stack is, and then the application insights will configure itself accordingly. I'm going to leave it at .NET. I'll leave actually all of this stuff on at its default and click Apply. We will now apply these changes. This will restart the site. Well, this is an important little bit of information here. Fortunately, this is a test dev site that nobody's actually using, so it's okay if we have some momentary downtime. So that's the long and the short of enabling diagnostics for IaaS and PaaS resources. Before I close up this demo, I want to bring you over to Azure Monitor, which is really a central pivot point for monitoring across the board in Azure. But the reason why I wanted to bring you here is down under Settings. We've got Diagnostic Settings here, and this is an excellent place for you to be aware of, because as you can see, you can filter across your resource groups and scoop up individual resources that you might not have even been aware that you can enable diagnostics for, right? So let me close my Monitor Settings menu to give us some more room. And we can see here this list of various resources. We've got some network security groups, public IP addresses. Looks like I've got a load balancer there, my SQL databases, event hubs. Wow, I have a lot of different resources. And you can see on the rightmost column where it says diagnostic status, either disabled or enabled. So why don't I grab this WinDemo2 network security group just as an example, and we'll turn on diagnostics, and I'll show you the setup is really the same regardless of the individual resource. You give the diagnostic settings a name. I forgot what this particular resource is called. Let me scroll back. WinDemo2 NSG. So I'll call this WinDemo2 NSG Diag. And you can send the diagnostic streams to up to three simultaneous locations. You can archive it to a storage account. Of course, we'll need to select one there. I've been using my TW Cloud Shell as a central repository. Now, your decision to centralize your logs into a single storage account is totally up to you and your organizational requirements. As you're going to see as we go on, when you're actually looking at the log data, you may not ever need to get down into the storage account directly if you're using something like Azure Log Analytics. So again, it's up to you. If you want to subscribe to the data, the telemetry stream coming out of the resource, you can stream it into an event hub. Now, you'd have to create one of these already. I do have one created. The top level container of an event hub is called a namespace, so I'll select that. And then you create the actual stream. I could either have Azure create one or choose a previously created. I'm going to have it create a new event hub topic. And then a policy refers to the access policy. It's essentially an access control list for the event hub stream, and that controls the degree to which a subscriber can get to that data. That's okay here. And then we can even simultaneously send that individual resource data into a log analytics workspace. So let's configure that. I already have an OMS workspace. We're going to talk about this OMS and what this means for you later in the course. But for now, I'm going to select my previously created workspace. So I'm covering a lot of ground, as you can see here. It does tell us that we'll be charged normal data rates for storage and transactions. So you also want to think about that. So that's the destination/destinations. The other thing that's common when you're in Azure Monitor and you're enabling resource level diagnostics is you need to determine what you're actually going to log. Now, there'll normally be two sections here. There'll be logs, which are specific to the resources, and then there'll be something for metrics. Now, an NSG doesn't have something like CPU or memory allocation, so you're not going to have metrics for this. But we do have network security group event and network security group rule counter. And we can specify either infinite retention by leaving them at 0, or we can come out to the maximum value, which it looks like is 365 days. That's fine. Make sure to save your changes, and then there you go. All right, so you got the general stream. You notice that the user interface is different at the VM and app service level as it is in Azure Monitor. So you have some work to do initially getting your resources wired up, but I want to encourage you that you can create automation for that such that it's not so much of a chore. Lots of different possibilities for that. Because I'm an infrastructure person, I do my automation using Azure PowerShell, and you can inject PowerShell into your deployment creation or just make the changes directly in your underlying Azure Resource Manager templates.